And now it's my honor to present to you the great Kohen Benjamin Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Please be seated. Praise Yahweh. It is truly a privilege and an honor to teach the character of Yahweh, the just, righteous, and perfect laws of Yahweh to the chosen remnant of the great house of Yahweh here at Abel and throughout the earth. I have entitled this sermon, We Are the House of Yahweh. We are the family of Yahweh. We are the donkey's coat tied to the chosen branch. Praise Yahweh. If you have your books of Yahweh, please turn over to the book of Isaiah 45. Isaiah 45. Isaiah 45 in your book of Yahweh on page 559. Please keep in mind, and I do want to stir your pure minds of remembrance as far as the importance of getting into the habit of transcribing and writing down all the words that comes forth from this lectern from the great house of Yahweh at Abel. The words of Yahweh, remember, Yahweh always honors the words of his prophets. Yahweh always honors the words of his prophets. Remember that. But what I would like to focus on here today is about the great name of Yahweh, but the name Hawkins. The word Hawkins is a zealous priest of Yahweh. A zealous priest of Yahweh. A lowly, humble worker doing the work of Yahweh. A zealous priest of Yahweh. Remember what we've been taught here at the Great Feast of Tabernacles from our beloved overseer and teacher. Remember what he said. He said, I don't study war, I study peace. You all remember that? I don't study war, I study peace. And what we will be focused on here today is concerning the perfect pattern of obedience. It's to bring the nation to the obedience of Yahweh's laws where they will trust in the every words of Yahweh from the one whom Yahweh has sent. In Isaiah chapter 45 and verse 1, concerning the perfect pattern of Yahweh's plan from the very beginning. The great prophets of Yahweh, the great high priest over the house of Yahweh, Yeshua Messiah, his disciples, they were given the ability to teach the character of Yahweh, the power to prophesy, and the power to bring forth life. And that's what the great house of Yahweh is ordained to do here in these last days, to bring forth the power to prophesy and the power to bring forth life. And it has been given to a king of righteousness, a king of peace in these last days, to set all things according to the order of Melchizedek. We have a great high priest over the house of Yahweh. The council of peace is between the great high priest and the last living witness of the two witnesses, who is Yahweh's authority here upon the earth. We must be mindful of the perfect pattern of obedience. But again, I don't study war, I study peace. We look throughout the history of mankind for the last 6,000 years, kings, the kings of the earth, the kings of the east, emperors, rulers. They have all been taught the ways of war, of retaliation and hatred and brutality. But the one whom Yahweh has sent in these last days, he studies the way of peace. This way of peace is a way of true, lasting peace. You can never achieve true, lasting, eternal peace without Yahweh's laws of righteousness. In the book of Isaiah chapter 45, beginning with verse 1, this is what Yahweh says to his anointed for uprightness. Remember the prophecies of Isaiah 41 concerning the three men that I think Pastor brought this out. I just wanted to, this is an awesome prophetic word magazine. You see that? Yahweh's last days prophesied work revealed by the two witnesses. Remember, the great priest, the sixth Malach, the great priest, Yaakov Hawkins, he awaits his resurrection. along with all of our righteous brothers and sisters who were partakers of that heavenly calling. Many of them have fallen asleep, and yes, you have worked side by side with many of our righteous brothers and sisters in the work of Yahweh. And all of them, they await their resurrection. And that's what this word Abelin, as we've been taught here at the Great Feast of Tabernacles, concerning Abelin, is a place of awakening, to awaken the people from their slumber and sleep. But they are ready to get back to work. And what we're doing here in these last days is to bring forth this chosen remnant of the great house of Yahweh, the manifestation of the sons and daughters of Yahweh, the revealing of the sons and daughters of Yahweh, the unfolding of the sons and daughters of Yahweh. But again, we are the house of Yahweh. We are the family of Yahweh. We are the donkey's coat tied to the chosen branch. Remember what Pastor taught us. There's no line or there's no rope that is tied. It's voluntary service. Yahweh wants your voluntary service to serve Him. And as we move forward in this sermon about to believe into the one whom Yahweh has sent, I want to just briefly cover that. This word believe into the one Yahweh has sent is to trust in the words of the one Yahweh has sent. To acknowledge with a yes, I agree with what you are teaching me. To receive with gladness and joy, but it also has to listen with the intent to obey. That's what the word believe means. But one of the greatest, if you know Yahweh's plan, if you study carefully the writings of Yahweh's prophesied spokesman, the seventh Malach of Yahweh, the beautiful righteous character of Yahweh is in the details of His plan. And you will discover and find Yahweh's beautiful righteous character within the details of Yahweh's plan. And Yahweh's plan from the beginning was to make mankind in His image and likeness. But this word believe is that you, as a voluntary servant of Yahweh, of the one Yahweh has sent in these last days, that you will come to love the one Yahweh has sent. It's a voluntary choice, brethren. You will come to love the one Yahweh has sent. You see, the great righteous disciples, Yeshua had to train them and teach them and prepare them. Come to this Sabbath. Come to every Sabbath, every eternal appointment, and be ready and be prepared to learn. Remember what Pastor said in going on to perfection. Let Yahweh work with you and let His Spirit grow in you. I'm repeating the words of the greatest teacher in the world. But let Yahweh work with you and let His Spirit grow in you. But His disciples, Yeshua's disciples, were trained. They were tutored. They were educated in the ways of righteousness. Yes, they stumbled, they fell, but they stood up and they continued to endure and persevere in spite of the persecution, in spite of the hatred, the mocking, the scoffing. But they were rooted and grounded and firmly established on the foundation of the words of the prophets, the apostles, and Yeshua Messiah Himself being the chief cornerstone. In Isaiah 45 and verse 1, notice the word of Yahweh. This is what Yahweh says to His anointed for uprightness. You remember Yahweh's last days prophesied work is being brought to you. It is brought to the inhabitants of the earth by His prophesied servant in these last days. He has been given the power to prophesy and the power to bring forth life. In other words, to teach the character of Yahweh, Yahweh's just, righteous, and perfect laws in these last days. This is what Yahweh says to His anointed for uprightness, whom I have taken by His right hand. You notice that? His right hand. Pastor explained it in his sermon where Yahweh grabs him with His right hand. You remember the right hand of Yahweh is Yeshua, the great high priest. He's the right hand of Yahweh's righteousness. But I have taken Him by His right hand to subdue nations. This word subdue is to teach, to train them, to make mankind in the image and likeness of Yahweh before Him. Yes, the strength of kings I will reveal, to open the doors before him, and the gates will not be shut. The gates will not be shut. I will go before you, and those who are being honored, I will make their way straight. The gates of bronze, notice here, I will break down, and the bars of iron I will cut. The great house of Yahweh at Abel is to bring forth that scepter of righteousness. Turn over to Isaiah 1 and verse 21. I just want to read that. I noticed that in my notes here concerning this city. At one time, notice what the great prophet Isaiah was inspired to write. How has that faithful city become a harlot? It was full of judgment and righteousness lodged in it, but now only murderers. So the message of the kingdom of Yahweh that comes forth from the great house of Yahweh, will you be able to be delivered from the power of the flame? Can your religions deliver you from the power of the flame? And that's what Yahweh cries out from the great house of Yahweh at Abel. How has the faithful city become a harlot? It was full of judgment and righteousness lodged in it, but now only murderers. Turn over to Isaiah 3 verse 1 before we get back to Isaiah 45. For behold, our Father Yahweh of hosts will take away from Jerusalem and from Yada the support, the stock, and the staff, the stage, speaking of the staff of Yahweh, to engrave Yahweh's laws on the hearts of his people. But this support and staff, the whole supply of food and the whole supply of water, is what Yahweh took away from Yada and Jerusalem, because they pushed aside the knowledge of Yahweh's laws, the righteousness of Yahweh that comes forth from the teachings of his laws. Notice in Isaiah 45 verse 3, I will give to you the treasures of darkness and the riches of secret places, so you may know that I, Yahweh, who calls you by name, am the Father of Yisrayl. For Yaakov, my servant's sake, and Yisrael, my chosen, I will call you by your name, Yaakov, and I surname you Yisrayl, though you did not recognize that it was me. I am Yahweh, and there is no other apart from me. There is no God, Elohim. I will strengthen you with this knowledge. If you notice our recent Prophetic Word, Prophetic Word magazine, Pastor talked about, there was the newsletter about this superior knowledge. Very few people will yearn and crave and thirst after this superior knowledge, the great wisdom and understanding of Yahweh that comes forth only from the prophesied, the chosen prophesied established house of Yahweh. But again, I will strengthen you with this knowledge, though you did not recognize that it was me, so that they may know from the rising of the sun, notice the prophecy here, to the place of its setting, that there is none besides me. I am Yahweh, and there is no other. I formed the light. Remember, the plan of Yahweh was to bring forth the light of Yahweh's laws. For in this plan was life, and that life was the light to mankind. I form the light, I create darkness, I make peace, and create destruction. As the great priests of Yahweh instructed us last Sabbath, to seek the kingdom of Yahweh, seek righteousness, and to seek peace, the peace of Yahweh that surpasses all understanding. I form the light and create darkness, I make peace and create destruction. I, Yahweh, do all these things. And notice here in verse 8, if you don't have verse 8 highlighted, I do want to encourage you to highlight it. But notice the word of Yahweh. Drop down, you heavens. Drop down, you heavens from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness. The firmament, Yahweh's shield of protection, Yahweh's shadow of protection is hovering over his family, the family of Yahweh. We are the house of Yahweh. We are the family of Yahweh. We are the donkey's coat tied to the chosen branch. But drop down, you heavens, from above, and let the skies pour down righteousness. Let the earth be released. Let salvation spring up, and let righteousness grow together. I, Yahweh, have created it. You all remember as you entered into the grounds of the great house of Yahweh at Abel, you know, these words, these reminders that we see that has been posted throughout our campground, it is for your admonition and your growth. It will awaken the trillions of cells within your body. It will stir your pure minds of remembrance. But Pastor wrote these words: unity in Yahweh's laws of righteousness tithers friendship with Yahweh, mankind, and kingdoms eternally. Remember, salvation is only offered to those who choose to be a part of Yahweh's house. Let the earth be released, let salvation spring up, and let righteousness grow together. Remember in Isaiah 28:17 for your notes, because of the time we just have to briefly cover it. But I will set justice as the measuring line and righteousness the plummet. In Psalms 25 verse 10, the path of great Yahweh are righteousness and truth. All who keep his covenant and his law will ever walk therein. In Proverbs 21:21 for your notes, he who follows after righteousness and mercy finds life, righteousness, and honor. Isaiah 42:21, Yahweh is well pleased for his righteousness' sake to magnify the law and to make it honorable. 1 Yochanan 3:7 and 8, you know, one of the mighty and zealous priests of Yahweh, he was bringing, if not the entire book of Yahweh at the Great Feast of Tabernacles. I was really astonished by his relentless zeal. You know who I'm talking about, the great priest who has so much to talk about concerning the plan of Yahweh from beginning to end. 1 Yochanan 3:7, little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness, and you as a man of Yahweh, a daughter of Yahweh, the called out ones, the drawn out ones of the great house of Yahweh, you must be the first to do righteousness, the first to practice righteousness, and the first to teach righteousness in your families. When you do so, brethren, you will bring peace and joy and unity within your family unit. And that's what Yahweh wants from each and every one of us. Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous just as he is righteous. He who commits sin, he who agrees with sin, he who teaches others to commit sin, transgresses also the law. He who commits sin is of the devil, for the devil has sinned from the beginning. For this purpose, the Son of Yahweh was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Go down to verse 11. This is what Yahweh, the Holy One of Yisrayl and Yisrayl Maker, says. Ask me about the things that are coming. Ask me about my sons, or the work of my hands, which I have given command. I have made the earth and created man upon it. I, even my hands, have stretched out the heavens, and all their hosts I have commanded. Notice in verse 13, I have raised him up in righteousness. Remember, children live what they learn. Children are the product of one's environment. And here the great prophet Isaiah described the great house of Yahweh as the fruitful fields of honor and glory. The fruitful fields of honor and glory. But in the foothills of this wilderness of the great house of Yahweh is where you will be taught and trained and be prepared in righteousness. But I have raised him up in righteousness. All your children will be taught by Yahweh, and great will be the peace of your children. In righteousness you shall be established. And that's found in Isaiah 54:13 and verse 14 for your notes. But I have raised him up in righteousness, and I will direct all his ways. He will rebuild my city and let my captives go free. Not for price, nor reward, says Yahweh of hosts. You see, teaching the scepter of righteousness, teaching Yahweh's laws of righteousness was never for personal gain or personal prestige. It was to beautify the people with the character of Yahweh. That's the greatest gift that you can give to others. To beautify the people with Yahweh's laws of righteousness. Remember one of Yahweh's mighty and zealous priests? Remember what he said? Rejoice when you see him, for he is Yahweh's gift to you. The gift of Yahweh that keeps on giving. The gift of Yahweh that keeps on giving. The gift of Yahweh that keeps on giving. It's all throughout his writings, the newsletters, the prophetic word magazines. We're extremely blessed, brethren, above all people on the face of the earth. Extremely blessed. I want to cover 4 key points concerning the mighty and zealous priest of Yahweh, the great Yisrayl Hawkins. I want you to write this down, brethren. Yahweh's people, you don't deserve to have your ears tickled. You deserve nothing but the truth and Yahweh's truth only. That's what it's all about here in the great house of Yahweh. The mighty and zealous priest of Yahweh, the great Yisrayl Hawkins, number 1, he is qualified. Number 2, he is authorized. Number 3, he is certified. And number 4, he has Yahweh's seal of approval to bring forth that scepter of righteousness in these last days. You agree with that, brethren? You agree with that? You do? Then that should settle the matter, right? That's what it's all about, brethren. He is qualified, authorized, certified, and Yahweh's seal of approval is placed on him. It's awesome, brethren. Come to every Sabbath of Yahweh. Come to every eternal appointments and be ready to learn, to grow in Yahweh's righteousness, to embrace it and grow in Yahweh's righteousness every minute, every second of the day. We can do it, brethren. Our job is to assist and to support this work. And I admire Yahweh's zealous priest, the mighty and zealous priest of Yahweh, the great Kohan Yisrael Abel Hawkins. He has the backbone, the guts to carry this work out all the way to the very end. Are you with him, brethren? And that's praise Yahweh. Let Yahweh work with you and let his spirit grow in you. Let the words of Yahweh grow inside of you. I'm repeating the words of my teacher. I've sat at his feet for a number of years, and I have the highest respect and regard for his method of teaching, his cadence, his continuity of the plan of Yahweh. It's really impressive, brethren. I just rejoice and I thank Yahweh so much for the one whom Yahweh has sent. For the great house of Yahweh at Abel is brought out, laid out, and formed, and it will come to pass, brethren. That's how Pastor explained it. It's in the going on to perfection. The great house of Yahweh at Abel is brought out, laid out, and formed, and it will come to pass. In Isaiah 45:22, I just want to cover this part here. Notice the words of the great prophet Isaiah. He said, "Look to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth." Notice that. Look to the prophets of Yahweh. Believe into the one whom Yahweh has sent. Believe the words of the prophets. Let me rehearse the word believe. This word believe is to acknowledge with a yes. I agree. To receive with joy and gladness. To trust in the words of the one Yahweh has sent. To listen with the intent to obey. to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Blessed and joyful is he who believes all that the prophets have spoken. But notice in Isaiah 45:22, look to me. Look to the great house of Yahweh. Seek the great habitation of Yahweh, the fruitful fields of the great house of Yahweh. Look to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth. Remember, salvation is only offered to those who choose to be a part of Yahweh's house. Remember, we covered this at the Great Feast of Tabernacles concerning the law of a slave. A slave was to work for his owner for an allotted time, say 6 years. But after his allotted time, he had the choice to remain with his owner, or he had the choice to go. But if that slave decided to remain with his owner, then you will take that slave to the doorpost and puncture his ear or nail his ear to that doorpost, which is the great house of Yahweh at Abel. That he will be a servant, a slave, a worker, a quiet, lowly worker doing the work of Yahweh forever in Yahweh's house. But look to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth, and to all our brethren, the 12 tribes of Yisrayl, the 12 tribes of Yaakov. Why would you die in your sins? Would you be able to deliver yourself from the power of the flame? No. The great house of Yahweh, we can prove everything what we teach you. We have the answers and the solutions to every problem there is in the world. And it's found here in Yahweh's peaceful laws of righteousness.
Praise Yahweh.
Look to me and be saved, all the ends of the earth. For I am Yahweh, and there is no other source of power. I have vowed by myself, the word is gone out of my mouth in righteousness, and will not return. That to me every knee will bow, every tongue will vow an oath. Go up to verse 14. I needed to cover this. This is what Yahweh says, the labor of Egypt and merchandise of Ethiopia and of the Sabians, men of stature, will come over to you, and they will be yours. This is where the prophecy of Isaiah's prophecy in Genesis 49, verse 10 and 11, where the obedience of the nations will come forth. Where the Sabians, men of stature, will come over to you, and they will be yours. They will come after you in chains. They will come over, and they will fall down to you. And they will make supplications to you, saying, surely Yahweh is in you, and there is none else. There is no other source of power. You notice that? The multitude of nations will know surely Yahweh is in you, and they will know that you were sent by Yahweh, that the one Yahweh has set over this work has been sent by Yahweh. In conclusion, turn over to Psalms 10 and verse 4. Psalms 10 and verse 4. Notice the word of Yahweh. Remember, the wise, only the righteous will understand the scepter of righteousness. But Yahweh tells you to come out from among them and be separate. But notice here in Psalms 10 and verse 4, the wicked will not seek for Yahweh. Though through pride, through his own pride, Yahweh is not in his thoughts. You see how important your thoughts are, brethren? Your thoughts become your words become your actions, and your actions defines your character. To believe into the one Yahweh has sent, everything must be established by words. You must acknowledge with your own mouth, yes, I agree. I will trust in the words of the one whom Yahweh has sent. Praise Yahweh. In conclusion, brethren, Rejoice when you see him, for he is Yahweh's gift to you, the gift of Yahweh that keeps on giving. May Yahweh bless your understanding. I have the privilege and honor to present to you my beloved brother and fellow priest and co-worker, the great Kohan Zephaniah Hawkins.
Would everyone please stand for the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kohan Yisrayl Hawkins?
Shalom, everyone.
You may be seated. Hey, Yahweh. Yahweh bless you. We've got a lot to cover today. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We already covered a bunch. These news events that are taking place. I hope you noticed that the wars, as John Bolton said, is to protect our oil. Did you get that? Everybody get that? All these wars we have fought will be in vain. All of them was to protect the oil. Look over to Revelation 6. All the wars we've fought could be in vain, he says, and all that money, trillions of dollars thrown away, if we don't win these next wars and take over this oil supply. Oh, this is beautiful. Praise Yahweh. Revelation 6:3, and when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second creature say, "Come and see." And there went another horse that was red, and power was granted to him that sat upon it to take peace from the earth. Of course, this is for the protection or taking over of the earth's oil supplies. That's what he just got through saying. All the wars we've fought is for that reason. And that's what the scripture said. Granted to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. And there was given unto him a great sword. Then the next one, verse 5, and when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third creature say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he that sat upon him had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard the voice in the midst of the four living. This is the quartet saying, "Measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. Don't hurt the oil." Don't hurt the oil. Oh, boy, what a beautiful thing. The quartet, I told you this years ago. And now they're admitting it. Reduce the population. Did you hear that? By down to 2 billion people. Where did you hear that before? That's what she said. Did you get it, everybody? Got to reduce the population down to 2 billion people. You know, when I brought this years ago, I don't remember when is the first time, but I think it was in the Mark of the Beast. I'm not sure. I can't remember. But I said there would be approximately 2 billion people left. When the 4/5 were killed, 4/5 of the earth's population, I said, would be wiped out. 2 billion people, approximately 2 billion people. We couldn't get the number. The calculators didn't go that high at that time. They may be better now. We may have to work on that scripture again, man. But they wouldn't go. They couldn't give us an exact number. Well, Yahweh said no man can count. So that's pretty true. The calculators can't count either. But the men that did the math, they said if 4/5 of the earth's population was wiped out, there wouldn't be 2 billion people left. Well, now there's 7 billion people. So all that's changed. Then the prophecy is getting ready to be fulfilled. Wipe 4/5 out, and you'll have 2 billion left, approximately. Praise Yahweh. The next one was the missionary work that we got, and this is just one of them, going on in Africa. We got them scattered all over the world now, people talking to people. Oh, this is so beautiful. It just amazes me. And then, of course, if you turn over to, I believe it's in Moshe, and we've been bringing this now for some, well, they said they think, our crew said they think it's since 1992. I've been bringing out the fact that about 99% of the diseases is caused by STDs, caused by diseases viruses that we have created by crossing them in our bodies and in the bodies of animals, created STDs, and these STDs, of course, they take up home in the human body and in that of animals. We showed you some of the animals. Two of the men showed this during the feast. The butcher and the Kohan that's over the butcher shop now. They showed you this during the feast and what it does to just one organ in the body of an animal. Of course, it works in all organs like it does in the human beings. But that is what's going on now and causing the diseases. And I've got an article that I'll get to it, I hope, showing the same thing now. And scientists knows this. They now know what we started bringing out at 1992. 1992, that would be about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago. In Moshe 3, in verse 11, he says, "Therefore, this is what Father Yahweh says." He tells about having no works except the 7 works that he has prophesied first here. And then he tells that he is associating only with the 12 tribes that he brought out of Israel. That becomes more clear every time you read anything in the Holy Scriptures. You see hints of this throughout the Holy Scriptures. All the other nations, all the other heathen before them were destroyed. They can't blame someone else or some other mixture. I know they're saying one tribe was of Esau and the other tribes was of Israel, but Esau, it plainly says, was wiped out. Yahweh said he totally eliminated it. So that ends that argument. Unless you just want to add your own. But you see this all through the Scriptures. So we have today the 12 tribes, which is a mixture of everything on earth, even animals now. And this is what you're going to see mandatory now taught in the schools. And we had to edit that film a great deal. I'm going to write about it and get this out as fast as I can in the prophetic word or newsletter. But the things that they're going to teach is every kind of evil profanity that they can come up with between man and man and man and women and man and beast. We couldn't show it. We had to take it out. It would make you sick too. It'd make you sick probably just hearing me talk about it. But it is evil what is going to be taught in the schools. I have a hard time believing that President Obama will sign this. But I guess it's already a law in New York. You can only take your children out on certain things, take them out of school on certain things. The rest of it is a must, or they will be dismissed from school. Parents could be fined if they don't let them see and be taught how to how to do all of it. Anyway, it is very evil what is going to be taught. Well, this is what's bringing the land down, bringing the strength down, as Amos 3. Did I read that scripture? Amos 3, in verse 11. Therefore, this is what Father Yahweh says: an adversary is surrounding the land. She will bring down your strength from you, and your palaces will be plundered. Now, of course, these sexual acts and STDs and diseases, that's what confuses the mind and is bringing down the strength. And it's a very reason that something like this would be shown to your child, and you have no choice but to let your child be shown these things in the schools. They taken away the rights of the parents to teach their children righteousness, and they're saying, no, this is what we're going to teach them instead of righteousness. Okay, go over to Malachi now. I read this to you before, but I've got to get this in your mind, what is taking place here, in order to understand Shiloh, and Shiloh come, and so forth. But in Malachi 3, in verse 9, 3 and verse 9, he says, you're cursed with a curse. It says the whole nation. Now get this in your mind also. So the witches' concoction of words that they use, and then the history that they try to make out like it's history. You know, there's a well-known saying that if you win the battle, you can write the history of that battle. Well, of course, that's what the Catholic Church has done. And as the commentators say, the Roman historians, they took delight in changing what they wanted to change and saying it the way they wanted it said in the history book. So what you're receiving is a bunch of lies. What you can base your life on, and I mean that literally, is what we're looking at here in our hands, the book of Yahweh, the instruction from the prophets, the prophets and apostles. But you're cursed with a curse, even this whole nation. That word nation is number 1471. The word heathen is number 1471. The word Gentile is number 1471. I get that. All you heathen, your strength is going down. Call yourself a Gentile or a German or a French or Greek or whatever you want to call it. You're a heathen if you don't follow these holy scriptures and don't believe them, and your strength is being zapped from you by what Satan is leading you into when you yield to her with your lust that she puts in front of you. And she's putting it in front of you daily now. And now it's going to be taught to the little children. Children as young as 11 years old are allowed to go without their parents' consent to the health department and get treated for STDs, for pregnancy, whatever they want to do. You know, they're free to do so. That too, they've taken it away from the parents, and the feds are being the judge, or the Catholic Church is being the judge. The Catholic Church, the Pope-dom, as one of the commentators calls it, is running the world today, and they've been running it. They've been running it since the days of the Pharisees, in fact, and gaining control more and more. That Alexander the Great, you know, the kingdom, the great Roman Empire, they say, well, that was all destroyed. That's a lie. That's the goofiest lie ever put in history. It divided. It took over the whole world. You see traces of it all through the United States. All the laws that are passed today, the government is based on that Roman system that was set up, improved or changed down through the century. It divided, as Daniel said. It didn't hold together. It divided and went throughout the whole earth. The teachings and the practices, that's what it is. Okay, keep this in mind now, that your strength is going down, and that the whole earth, they're all heathen. That's the reason Yahweh said in the last days, I will establish my house. It was needful for him to establish his house because there was no house of Yahweh on the face of the earth until he established his house. And his house is bringing forth perfection and will bring forth perfection. And of course, that's the Shiloh, but let me get into it in a different way here. In Genesis 49, let's go back there. I don't want to take a chance on missing something here. But Shiloh come. And if you look at verse 10, Genesis 49 and verse 10. Anyone can see how the world is going down. I mean, the diseases are all multiplying. Even if they were not going to have nuclear war, mankind would only survive for a short time the way the diseases are increasing. I'll read you an article on that in just a little bit. In Genesis 49, verse 10, the scepter will not depart from Yada, nor a ruling staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom tribute belongs, and the obedience of the nations is his. Now that's the way we translated it. The King James, as I brought out, and we should have left this word in there, but we didn't. But this is the word that everyone has trouble with, because you can't get, now listen to me, everybody, listen, you can't get the definition of this word from a dictionary or a commentator. They don't understand it. And I hate to argue with dictionaries, but I do all the time. When we find them wrong and when we find history wrong, we also argue with that when we know it doesn't agree with the Holy Scriptures, and it doesn't even agree with the other nation's history of it or the other writer's history of it. We know something is wrong. But the King James says, the scepter shall not depart from Yada, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh come. Well, of course, they translate that, or they say it, like one says the word Shiloh, the Messiah, they say. Another one says the peaceful one, till Messiah comes. So that ended it. No. In fact, he was the one that had to come and prove that he had right to this scepter of righteousness. And then his job began. And of course, Shiloh is still coming forth. But if you get this in your mind, that this was part of Shiloh, a peaceful one that would teach peace, that's what Yahshua did. He would also die for the sins of the world. That was part of Shiloh coming, or as it should have been written, bring forth, as Shiloh brings forth. And we'll get the actual word Shiloh and how it's given in the Scriptures, and each place it's given and what it means in each one of that's the way you get it. First off, you've got to know the Scriptures, and then you've got to start putting them together to see what Yahweh shows you. And I don't care what the dictionary says, what Yahweh shows you is what that word means. And there's no, praise Yahweh, there's no way to understand what he's saying here in this prophecy, and this is a beautiful prophecy that just starts here and goes throughout the whole Bible. The whole book of Yahweh, 1 and 2, doesn't even end till you get clear through Revelations. In fact, the last part of Revelation is the finishing job of Shiloh coming forth, Shiloh bringing forth. Blessed are those who keep his laws, for they have right to the tree of life. The tree of life in Genesis 1. Got that? Tree of life. Tree of life, living forever. When mankind turned from Yahweh's laws, Yahweh, if you remember, set a guard to keep them then from partaking of eternal life. Why? Well, because if he had let them turn after they saw the trouble there's causing, and turn and start repenting and turn to Yahweh and receiving eternal life, then it would spoil the whole plan here. You would have people down through the centuries that was going Satan's way, causing what we're seeing in the world today, while you're having others then agree with Yahweh and agree that this way is the way to peace, joy, and love. So Yahweh put a guard to keep them from partaking of the tree of life. He just shut them off. So that is why a person's got to be called by Yahweh, taken out of the system, and brought to his house to learn. And when that comes into your mind, he said, seek first the kingdom of Yahweh. Go to the priest, and they will teach you the Shiloh to come. And you'll understand that perfectly about 10 sermons from now, maybe. Well, it does mean Shiloh, Messiah, peaceful one, comes, but it actually means, from Scripture to Scripture, it means a plan. It means a plan. It means a plan of 7 works. It means to bring forth everlasting peace, abundant living, as Yeshua said. Yeshua actually said that what we're going to suffer in the world is not worthy to be compared to what we're going to receive. All of these sufferings are going to be quickly forgotten. If you notice, one of the first things that this brings forth, or the last things it brings forth here, is obedience of the heathen. The heathen. Now, a while ago we just read where all the heathen, that's the ones that are shut off from Yahweh, that's the ones that's not in the house of Yahweh, ones that are not called today, all the heathen, Yahweh said, their strength is going down, and they translated it nation as if that just applied to Israel, the land, the tiny land of Israel. By the time that prophet spoke, which was about 700 BC, Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, had almost totally taken over all the colonies of the earth that had spread out before them. And Yahweh said he's going to drive them out. He says the earth is going to vomit them up. They've already defiled the earth, he said. And he said, you're going to go in and inherit the land, and don't you do the same thing, or it'll do the same thing to you. And that's the reason today they're saying, there's a lot of study went into this fact. It's a fact right now, the way things stand, that the earth cannot support 7 billion people. The food supply, mainly the oil supply, can't support that many people. Now, we can sock on more fertilizers, but they know eventually that this commercial fertilizers will run out, but also it'll burn the land to where eventually that land is going to have to rest to get back to its original state. Yahweh has shown his house how to bring it back to that state. And praise Yahweh, we got the best method on earth and given to us by the Holy Scripture. But the way the earth is right now, it could only go a little while longer without starvation setting in. And once starvation sets in, then this also brings more, it increases the sickness and disease. So the increase of cholera and related illnesses go with it. It lowers the immune system to where these STDs that they have in their bodies at this time has the ability to kill. So like a potato plant that is malnourished, or a tomato plant in the soil that can't raise tomatoes. It doesn't have that ability left in it to raise tomatoes. Quickly, the diseases set in, the bugs go in to destroy it, and so forth. Now, I learned long ago from a man named Rodell. He wrote a magazine called Prevention at that time. He came to a meeting that I came to also and talked to him and asked him questions, but he had demonstration fields set up, and he would actually have a row of depleted land, or a few rows. Then a few steps away, he would have the land that was rebuilt to where it would support plants. And he proved that bugs would not bother the plants where they were healthy, fully healthy. It would not bother them, but it would completely destroy the others. Remember that, because we're going to rebuild the earth. Praise Yahweh. Now, in this, he said, the obedience of the nations. If you'll go over to Deuteronomy 31, Yahweh shows you here, if you just pay attention to the 12 tribes, he's dealing with the 12 tribes. He's not dealing with the heathen that would be separate from the 12 tribes. There is no heathen left that are separate from the 12 tribes. Even biology proves this. I don't know why history keeps these lies going in the classroom. I guess to deceive. That's the only reason I can see, because it doesn't even prove true by their own test, their own proof. But in Deuteronomy 31, now, he says in verse 27, he says, "For I know how rebellious and stiff-necked you are. If you have been rebellious against Yahweh this day, while I am yet alive and with you, then how much more will you rebel after my death?" Now, this is, of course, Moshe speaking here. And if you this right here occurred in 1451. He wrote this to these people. He said this to these people, and this was written. If you want to make a note at the side of that verse, BCE 1451. If you wanted to go back to Exodus 12, which occurred in 1491, you can see 40 years after Exodus 12, 40 years. Exodus 12 was when Moshe first started teaching under the priest Jethro, brought the children of Israel out of Egypt, and started teaching them the laws of Yahweh. Well, 40 years later, doesn't it look like that they should have improved some? Well, now remember what I told you about cutting them off from the tree of life. Yahweh gave them His laws, taught them His laws, but they didn't accept His laws like people tend to believe, and the Christianity, they take delight in saying, those people followed the law. They didn't follow the laws. Not anywhere down the line. 40 years later, He's saying, even while I'm with you, you're stiff-necked and rebellious. That was 40 years later. If you look on over to 1 Samuel, here we have a righteous priest that Yahweh set up that had a circuit that he went to throughout the land of Israel. Of course, by the time Samuel was on the scene, most of the people, especially the young people, had grew up, wanted no part of it, spread out to other nations, started colonies, started forming armies, and of course went to war against the weaker peoples of the lands. Killed them, took their land. But 1 Samuel 15, I don't know what I said, but it's 1 Samuel 15. And notice verse 22. Now this 1 Samuel 15 was written in 1087 BCE. 1087. And he says here in verse 22, then Samuel said, has Yahweh a great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of Yahweh? Now he was speaking to a king here, a king who was over Israel, and people were supposed to follow his example. And Samuel is saying, you are disobeying. He says, behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. Obedience is what we see that's supposed to come forth and is going to come forth from Genesis 49, verse 10. He said, obedience of the heathen, obedience of the nations, obedience of the Gentiles, whichever words you want to use, they're going to be obedient once Shiloh comes forth totally. 2 billion of them are going to be obedient. Now, in 1 Samuel here, 15:22, he says, to obey is better than sacrifice, to listen, that word should be hearken, than the fat of rams. To obey, it's everything. If you won't obey Yahweh, you won't be a part of his kingdom. That is an absolute fact. And when you're told to do something, as Saul was told to do, just given a simple command, first off, don't bring any of those animals back with you. Don't do this. Well, he didn't tell him those animals are diseased. We don't want them in this flock. We want to try to straighten up our flock. We're supposed to bring cleanliness to the land. He could have went in and talked to him for 5 days, trying to explain to this rebellious, stiff-necked attitude. But if you don't obey, if you're not obedient, you won't make it. Notice what he said to Saul here. And that's what we're going to receive out of 2 billion people. Obedience. Because rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. It's sin. Rebellion is sin. And stubbornness is the same as iniquity. It's the same as doing away with the law. Stubbornness. It's the same. Either you humble yourself, as Yeshua said, or you won't be part of this 2 billion people, or the ones that lead the 2 billion people into obedience. You can't rebel and teach obedience, right? Your action speaks louder than words. Iniquity is doing away with Yahweh's laws, as Isaiah 24 showed. It's also God worship. It's following this one that is bringing your strength down, as Moshe showed. There's a power surrounding the land. That power, of course, is deception, but it's also coming forth now from radio waves, which we saw before Satan was cast down. She was queen of the radio waves. That was one of her names before she was cast down. And she was actually sending radio signals that no one could understand. They never did figure it out. But it was send it to the earth even, coming clear to the earth. And it was the strongest radio station in the universe that they are aware of, that she had control of. Well, now she has television. She has the schools. The Vatican has seen to it that they own all the schools in the land they control. Now, where they don't own the schools, where they don't have control of the land, they're fastly trying to take it over. Where there's a king, like there was in Egypt, saying, no, I don't want that here, well, he's no longer king. Where there's a king like Gaddafi, he doesn't exist anymore. Speaking of that, I don't know if you saw the news. Did we show that where we didn't show that where Hillary Clinton was laughing? Okay, we'll show it next week. But I want you to see that there's no natural affection anymore. The love has grown cold, and we're going to bring that next week. The love of the world has grown cold. They take delight in fighting and war and death, even beating the man's dead body, brutalizing it after he was dead and before he died, and sodomy, of course, too, on this man before he finally died, maybe after he died. All of these evil, wicked things, brethren, is coming forth from the 12 tribes that was shown in Genesis 49, just exactly like the prophet said it would for the last days. For their pleasure, they hamstrung an ox. I wouldn't even bring that out. You know, you're going to have to study it for yourself to find out what it means. It's like showing these pictures of acts that took place. And this was in the film. We just cut it out. But it's going to be shown. It's being shown now throughout the world. And the people can glory in it. In fact, Hillary Clinton was laughing about this, going there, seeing the body and laughing about it. How in the world can anyone have any love at all? Well, she doesn't. She doesn't even know what love is. She takes delight in the death of a man that took care of a nation for about 50 years, being a father to everyone there for about 50 years, in a land that wanted to take over, of course, and put what they call freedom there, where the children can be taught how to sin and how to cause diseases and kill themselves. Well, of course, he says this is the worship of the gods that Yahweh said when Adam and Eve sinned. He said they become as the gods. So cut off life from them, and then we will pick out the ones we want to bring Shiloh through. Because you have rejected the word of Yahweh. Now this is Samuel. Because you have rejected the word of Yahweh, he also has rejected you from being king. You want to be a king in the kingdom? Notice what Saul said. There's some pressure being put on me, he said. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. Yes, I know I've sinned because I have transgressed the commandment of Yahweh and your words, or by breaking your words, your command that you gave me, because I was more afraid of the people, and I gave in to them. Some excuse. Well, my wife told me to do that, and I did it. Had to. She's the boss. Well, Samuel said, because you have done this, Yahweh has rejected you, and I'm not going any further with you. Well, this now was in 1087. This was 404 years after Exodus 12. You don't see any obedience here, is what I'm trying to point out. And of course, before that now, in 1 Samuel 8, we see all the elders of Israel disobeying going in disobedience against Yahweh and saying we don't want him to rule over us. Well, one of the kings that didn't want that, of course, I guess, was Saul. In Isaiah now, I'd skip part of this, but you can find it in every book, but go over to Isaiah, Isaiah 1 first, the first chapter. Now, this Isaiah was written in 760 BCE, 760, and he says in chapter 1 and verse 1, the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, and he says, hear, O heavens, verse 2, and give ear, O earth, for this is what Yahweh has spoken. I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. He's speaking of Judah and Jerusalem, but also speaking of the 12 tribes of Israel, what was left in the land of Israel. The ox knows its owner, the donkey knows its owner's crib, but Israel does not know. My people do not consider, he says. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children who are corruptors. They are corrupters, like the Catholic Church today, who teaches against Yahweh's laws, has control of all the schools in America, has control of the municipal systems in America. It would be hard, extremely hard, for a president, even if he was a righteous man of Yahweh, to actually overcome any of this, what is going on, and not go along with the tide that is set right now. Those schools were set up in America back in the days right after Columbus, right after that lie was told that he was the first to discover America. But those schools and the government, the municipal systems were set up under, of course, the Catholic guideline. It just so occurred that Yahweh put enough people in who had come here from Europe and had seen what was going on there in the distressful situation that the people were having to live under, and they couldn't practice a religion. Of course, there was enough fighting going on in Europe at that time to bring about the allowance or the law to allow people to own a Bible. Because before that, there was actually a law that you could not own a Bible or a manuscript or practice anything in the Holy Scripture. And if they caught you practicing it, they accused you of being a witch. Like they did the so-called witch doctors. Witch doctors that you heard about, these Indian witch doctors. Well, it so occurs that those witch doctors were people who practiced curing people with herbs, vitamins, putting them on the right diets. Well, these were witch doctors with their own concoctions. They weren't following the laws of the drug land. They didn't use drugs. So they were classified as witches, and of course they killed them as fast as they could, get them out of their way to keep them from teaching anything righteousness or holy, anything from the Holy Scripture. They have forsaken Yahweh. They have provoked. Now this is the 12 tribes, brethren, and this is Judah and Jerusalem at that time, with life, or the tree of life, shut totally off from them. They have forsaken Yahweh. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel to anger. That's written wrong. Yahweh is not angry. He doesn't get angry. They have gone away backwards, separated, Why would you be stricken anymore? Why would you revolt more and more? Notice the word stricken. This is stricken with disease epidemics. The same thing that we're seeing in the world today. So this is how far they had gone or taken what they had brought from Egypt with them, as Samuel said, as Yahweh told Samuel. They've been rebellious ever since I brought them out of Egypt, he said. Well, these were their children and their children's children, down to about the 4th generation here. Well, and they were still being stricken at that time with disease epidemics. Why would you be stricken anymore? Why don't you turn from this so Yahweh will heal you? That's what we're saying today. That's what I've been saying now for 50 years here in this wilderness. Why would you revolt more and more, he said. The whole head is sick and the whole heart is faint. From the sole of the foot to the top of the head, there is no soundness in it. Only wounds, bruises, putrefying sores. They have not been closed or bound up, nor soothed with ointment. Meaning, there are ointments that Yahweh shows, oils and so forth that can be used. But of course, that is a concoction of a witch. That's what they want you to believe, and they're trying to knock all of that out too. The days that this was written was 7 BCE 760. That's 691 years after Exodus 12. In Isaiah 24, he actually shows that this will bring about the end of the world. So I don't think we need to go after this part, because he's showing that this rebellion here and what it does. He says, behold, Yahweh makes the earth empty, or allows it to become empty. So we're seeing here a depopulation of 4/5 of the earth's population. And as the woman says, we're going to get rid of enough to bring it down to 2 billion people. That's the only way the earth can survive. I hope y'all caught that. Better play that again next week, okay? Behold, Yahweh allows the earth to be empty and made waste, perverts the face of it, and scatters abroad the inhabitants. And it will be as with the people, so with the priest, and with the servant, so with the owner, with the maid, so with the mistress, as with the buyer, so with the seller, as with the lender, so with the one that borrows, as with him who takes usury, so with him who gives usury to him. The land will be utterly emptied and utterly plundered, for Yahweh has spoken this word. Now, he was not saying, I'm going to do this. He says, your ways that you are practicing is bringing this about. We see it now. We're in the last days, as Isaiah shows here, and we see every bit of this taking place. It's even broadcast on the news, but no one in the world has sense enough to see what's taking place. They don't even know this is happening to them. They think everything is glorious and fine. I've got my buttons here in front of me that I can punch and gaze into them till my brain goes dead. And that's all they care. The earth mourns and fades away. And nobody is noticing what is taking place except the house of Yahweh. The world mourns and fades away. And the haughty people of the earth languish. Yes, they're going down. Their strength is coming down, as Moshe said. The earth also is defiled. This is the reason for it, the defiling of the earth. Because they have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Because of this, the curse, you're cursed with a curse. Cursed with a curse. Even the whole Gentile nation, the whole heathen nations, whatever you want to call them, they're cursed. And that is what's bringing them down and making the earth mourn. Has devoured. Now, if you put this together with what Malachi said about tithing, tithing is one of the ways that Yahweh's house speaks out, through the tithing. That's what pays to have to send His work out in these last days, always have. To pay pastors or teachers or judges or so forth, righteous ones, to keep Yahweh's judgments, Yahweh's laws being taught. And when that was shut off, and those people pushed back and killed, or pushed back into a single place like Galilee, they were pushed back out of the cities, persecuted until they ran. And Galilee was the only place that Yahweh's laws was being taught. And Malachi says, you're cursed with a curse because you're cutting off Yahweh, you're cutting off the means of reaching and bringing forth the words that would stop you from mourning and suffering anymore, he said. Why would you do this to yourselves anymore, he said. Well, they've cut off, Satan has cut this off, the teaching from the rest of the land. So, without the complete teaching, no one understood why they had to do this or that, why they had to be obedient. Because of this, the curse has devoured the earth, and they who dwell therein are desolate. Therefore, the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and about 2 billion people left. See that? Isn't that beautiful? Burned, and about 2 billion people left. This was 700. That was 760 years later. This was written in 760 BCE. And 760 years later now, 760 years later, go over to Yahshua. Yahshua came 760 years after Isaiah said the end is going to be just like this, and named it, and showed you that few men would be left. Matithia 17:17. And Yahshua answered and said, O faithless and perverse. Remember that, perverse, because it means the same thing as profaneness. Remember Jeremiah 23, 15, where he says, I'll wait on you. That's, what did I say? It's Matithia. I did say Matithia, 17:17. Matithia 17:17. Well, Yahshua now is saying here, this is 760 years later, 760 years after the prophecy there at Isaiah 24, and Yahshua now has come on the scene, and he is preaching to the same ones, Judah and Jerusalem, those who are still in charge of that and still had the Galileans pushed back to an unwanted land, a God-forsaken land. And Yahshua answered and said, O faithless and perverse. Now that profaneness, it means the same thing as profaneness has gone out to all the land, all the world, in fact, is what that word meant. From you, the priests and prophets of Jerusalem, not the priests and prophets of Yahweh, but they were in Galilee, but the priests and prophets of Jerusalem, from you, profaneness has gone out to all the land. Well, here Yahshua now, 760 years after that, says, O faithless and perverse generation. This faithless, it means not following the faith given to you by Yahweh. Well, of course, Malachi said it was starved out, cut off, persecuted, pushed back, and so forth. That's what the prophet showed. So there wasn't any there. And Yahshua said, this is how this 12 tribes stand here today. How long will it be with you? How long must I be patient with you? Bring him here to me. Well, that's going on to something else, but notice, faithless and perverse generation, Yeshua said. Now in Mark 8, in verse 38, Mark 8, verse 38, you got to get this one because Mark gives a different word here that we're going to be seeing in the history and the prophecies and so forth that Shiloh fights against. That's part of Shiloh coming or Shiloh bringing this in. In Mark 8, verse 38, therefore, whoever is ashamed of me or my words, my teaching of the laws and the prophets, in this adulterous, get that now because it means adultery, but it also means God worship, and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of him. Now notice he calls it an adulterous and sinful generation that he's in right there. That's the 12 tribes, Judah and Jerusalem. Does that sound like they were keeping the laws of Yahweh? You know, Christianity lies a lot. And in fact, their total teaching is lies. And they would have you believing that these people kept the laws of Yahweh, and they were strict keepers of the laws of Yahweh, and they persecuted Yeshua because he wouldn't keep the law. Whereas Yeshua and Yochanan was teaching them the laws. That's why they killed them, both of them. Cut off John's head and hung Yeshua on a stake. Well, in Luke 9 now, Luke 9 and verse 41. Luke 9, verse 41. He says, then Yeshua answered and said, a faithless and perverse generation. Again here, through Luke, how long will I be with you and put up with you? Well, he was getting a little bit aggravated at that time, but I think Yeshua knew how long he would be with them, how long he would have to put up with them. And he's still putting up with them and loves every minute of it, but he had to write that. He didn't suffer some of the things that I'm suffering. They didn't have the telephones back then. So he could go off and be by himself. I bet he could even take a nap sometimes and without his phone ringing. Well, may the peace of Yahweh bless you. I love you, and be sure and be here next week. Yahweh bless you. Shalom.